We live in a world obsessed with appearances. A world where the symbols of wealth are paraded in plain sight. Glimmering sports cars roar down city streets, colossal mansions perch atop private hills, and designer brands flash from the wrists and shoulders of those eager to be seen. Wealth, it seems, is something you can spot from a mile away. But what if the richest person you ever met was the one you never noticed? What if, as you walked past an old man quietly sipping coffee, dressed in worn flannel, you were brushing shoulders with a hidden multi-millionaire? What if a life of relentless modesty and thrift concealed a fortune that could change the destiny of an entire town? This is the story of Ronald Read, an unassuming man from Vermont. He spent decades performing manual labor, driving an old car, and living in a home heated by his own split firewood. He never sought attention, never craved luxury, and never wore his wealth on his sleeve. Yet when he passed away at age 92, he left behind a secret. An $8 million fortune, built not by lottery winnings or high-flying business deals, but by simple, steadfast investing and a life defined by discipline. How did a man who was sometimes mistaken for a beggar become one of Vermont's quietest philanthropists? How did he outlast the temptations of consumerism and accumulate a sum most can only dream of? And what can we learn from the extraordinary contrast between the life Ronald Read lived and the legacy he left behind? Let's step into the secret life of Ronald Read, a humble janitor, a frugal neighbor, and the unlikely millionaire whose story might just rewrite your definition of wealth. Ronald Read's life was the embodiment of simplicity. Born in the small town of Dummerston, Vermont in 1920, he grew up during the Great Depression, a time when most families learned to stretch every dollar, mend every shirt, and waste nothing. The lessons of those lean years stayed with him for life. Ronald didn't chase status or privilege. Instead, he found dignity in hard work and contentment in the ordinary. After serving his country in World War II, Ronald returned home and settled into a routine that would define the next half-century. For 25 years, he worked as a gas station attendant, pumping fuel and changing tires for local customers. Rain or shine, Ronald was there, his hands stained with oil, his clothes smelling of gasoline. When the gas station closed, he took a job at the local J.C. Penney, sweeping floors and keeping the building in order for another 17 years. He finally retired in 1997 at the age of 76, but even in retirement, Ronald's habits never changed. He drove a battered 1990 Toyota Yaris, a car so modest he only bought it when his previous vehicle could no longer be repaired. He patched his own clothes rather than buying new ones. Winters in Vermont are brutal, but Ronald split his own firewood to heat his home, saving money and staying active. He shopped with coupons, seeking out deals on even the smallest purchases. To outsiders, he seemed almost comically frugal. Some jokingly called him the beggar, but Ronald never took offense. He simply smiled and carried on, unconcerned with how others viewed him. His family and friends saw a man of routine and humility, never suspecting the scale of his secret. He didn't dine out at fancy restaurants, didn't travel to exotic destinations, and didn't indulge in the latest gadgets or fashion. In a culture obsessed with outward displays, Ronald was invisible, a man hiding in plain sight. But beneath the surface, something remarkable was happening. Ronald Read was quietly, methodically building an empire. Ronald's secret wasn't a high-paying job, a wealthy family, or a lucky break. It was patience. It was discipline. It was the wisdom to understand that wealth is not about what you make, but about what you keep and how you help it grow. He had a simple strategy. Invest in what you know, stick with it, and let time do the heavy lifting. Ronald read financial newspapers at the local library, keeping track of companies and trends. He wasn't a Wall Street insider or a market timer. He didn't chase the hottest stocks or try to predict the next big thing. Instead, he focused on blue-chip companies, those with long track records of stability, profitability, and, most importantly, reliable dividends. Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, General Electric. These were the cornerstones of Ronald's portfolio. He bought shares, often reinvesting dividends, and rarely sold unless he believed a company was in real trouble. Decade after decade, he watched as those small investments grew, powered by the magic of compounding. Compounding is the quiet force that turns patience into prosperity. Each dividend check Ronald received was reinvested. buying more shares, which in turn produced more dividends. Over years and decades, his modest initial sums grew, sometimes slowly, sometimes in bursts, but always upward. The secret wasn't luck. It wasn't genius. It was the willingness to wait, to resist the urge to spend now for the promise of much more later. Ronald lived well below his means, shunning debt and unnecessary expenses. Every dollar he didn't spend was a soldier in his army of compounding, working tirelessly to secure his future and, as it turned out, the future of others. By the time he reached his 90s, Ronald had quietly amassed a fortune that dwarfed the wealth of many who lived far more extravagantly. And then, in 2014, Ronald Read's journey came to an end. He passed away at the age of 92, leaving behind a will that would shock his entire community. When his estate was revealed, friends, family, and neighbors were dumbfounded. This quiet, reserved man, who wore patched clothes and drove an old Yaris, was worth more than $8 million. The revelation rippled through Brattleboro, Vermont, sparking disbelief and awe. But perhaps the most astonishing part wasn't the size of his fortune, but what he chose to do with it. Ronald left the majority of his estate to two local institutions close to his heart: $4.8 million to the Brattleboro Memorial Hospital and $1.2 million to the Brooks Memorial Library. These were not random acts of charity. Ronald had spent countless hours at the library, poring over the financial papers and learning about the world. The hospital had cared for him and his loved ones over the years. His gifts were a final act of gratitude, a way to give back to the town that had shaped his life. As the news spread, people struggled to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the reality of his wealth. Even those closest to him, family members, neighbors, co-workers, had no inkling of the extent of his investments. He never boasted, he never complained. He simply lived, day after day, according to the principles he valued. Ronald's story is a powerful reminder. Wealth isn't about outward appearances. It's not about the car you drive, the house you own, or the clothes you wear. True wealth is about what you quietly build, one small step at a time, over a lifetime. It's about the invisible discipline, the choices made in private, and the patience to let those choices bear fruit. The lessons from Ronald Read's life are clear, and they cut through the noise of a world obsessed with image. First, never judge a book by its cover. The truly wealthy are often those you least expect. Not the flamboyant, but the unassuming. Not the loud, but the quiet. Second, the power of saving and long-term investing can transform even the most modest income into substantial wealth. You don't need to be a financial wizard or draw a massive salary. What you need is a commitment to live below your means, to save diligently, and to invest in solid, long-term opportunities. Let compounding do the heavy lifting, and be patient enough to see it through. Third, the simple life can be the foundation for extraordinary prosperity. Ronald was not deprived. He found satisfaction in work, in community, and in the small pleasures of everyday life. By resisting the endless pull of consumption, he found freedom. Freedom from debt, from stress, and from the need to impress. Imagine if more of us lived like Ronald Read, not in deprivation, but in thoughtful simplicity. Imagine the possibilities of a world where wealth is built quietly, responsibly, and shared generously. Ronald's story is not just an anomaly. It is a blueprint, available to anyone willing to embrace its lessons. The path to financial freedom isn't always glamorous. It's not about windfalls or jackpots. It's about persistence, discipline, and the courage to think and act differently from the crowd. So what can you take away from the secret life of an $8 million beggar? Start by taking stock of your own habits. Are you chasing appearances or building substance? Are you letting your money work for you, or are you working endlessly for your money? Are you investing for the future or living only for today? The first step is simple. Live below your means. Track your expenses. Identify places where you can cut back and redirect those savings toward investments. Avoid unnecessary debt. Resist the lure of instant gratification. Next, learn the basics of investing. You don't need to be a market genius. Focus on solid blue-chip companies or diversified index funds. Reinvest your earnings. Let compounding do its quiet magic. Time, not timing, is your greatest asset. Finally, remember that true wealth is not just measured in dollars, but in the impact you leave behind. Ronald Read changed his community forever, not by showy generosity, but by a lifetime of quiet, consistent effort. His legacy is a library filled with books, a hospital filled with hope, and a town forever touched by his invisible hand. Your path to wealth doesn't require a radical transformation. It starts with small, consistent steps, decisions made every day, habits built over years, and the patience to let your efforts grow. The next Ronald Read could be anyone. It could be you. So as you move forward, carry this story with you. Let it be a reminder that the greatest fortunes are often hidden in the most unexpected places, and that the key to building your own is not found in extravagance, but in discipline, patience, and the courage to live differently. The story of Ronald Read is not just a tale of financial success. It's a testament to the power of humility, the strength of character, and the enduring value of quiet persistence. It's proof that even in a world obsessed with appearances, true wealth is so much more than meets the eye. Remember the $8 million beggar. Let his story inspire your own journey, one step, $1, one wise decision at a time. Because your financial future is not written by fortune or fate, but by the choices you make, starting today. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the secret life of Ronald Read. Stay curious, stay disciplined, and never underestimate the power of living simply. The path to wealth is open to all. Where will yours begin?